A correct assumption should fill the missing link and be necessarily true. Fill the missing link, but yes, you have to be careful. An assumption always fills the missing link, but everything that fills the missing link is not an assumption. Assumption is something that fills the missing link and is necessarily true for an argument to hold ground. An assumption always strengthens an argument, and when turned negative, it voids the argument. Let's understand this through a live example. Look at this argument. The question is, which of the following is an assumption made in the argument? We have seen this argument in the earlier videos also, and we are going to use this argument in many of our concept videos. The information given is 15% GDP growth, and the conclusion is that the party has done a good job. It should stay in power. The missing link is, of course, between the GDP growth and the performance of the party. A valid assumption would be something that fills the missing link and is necessarily true. Look at this. GDP growth is an important factor in deciding the performance of a political party. This tends to make sense. It does fill the missing link, the gap between the GDP growth and the conclusion that the party has done a good job. This is a fine assumption, most importantly because it is something that has to be true for the argument to hold ground. The conclusion is based on the GDP growth, and therefore GDP growth has to be an important factor in deciding the performance of a political party. More examples. Same argument, and look at these examples now. Do you think this is a fine assumption statement? GDP growth is the only factor? No, this is not a fine assumption because this doesn't have to be necessarily true for the argument to hold ground. GDP growth need not be the only factor. Even if it is just one of the important factors in deciding the performance of a party, the argument would hold, and therefore this is not a fine assumption. Look at this one. GDP growth is the most important factor. Do you think this is a fine assumption? Once again, no, because GDP growth doesn't have to be the most important factor. Even if it is just one of the main factors, the argument would hold ground. So not a good assumption. Look at this one. While this will be a very fine strengthening statement, this does not qualify as an assumption because it is not necessary that no previous government should have led to a GDP growth of more than 10% for the argument to hold ground. Even if some of the previous governments led to a higher growth, the argument may hold. So it doesn't qualify as an assumption. None of the other similar economies witnessed a growth of more than 12% during the same span. Once again, while this will qualify as a very fine strengthening statement, this is not a fine assumption because this doesn't have to be true for the argument to hold ground. 15% GDP growth is the highest in 100 years for Zatora. Again, while this will be a very fine strengthening statement, this does not qualify as an assumption because for the argument to hold, 15% GDP growth should be a good enough number to reach the conclusion. It need not be the highest in 100 years. So not a good assumption. This was the concept, friends. GMAT shots are deliberately kept brief. For an elaborate explanation, please watch the Stage 1 conceptual videos in our program. Thanks for watching.